those. So.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, we are good to go.
Okay, thank you, Valerie. On behalf of the Pismo Beach Chamber of Commerce, welcome and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. My name is Liz Christofferson. I am the founder and CEO of Empower Consulting Group, and I will be your moderator for this evening's session. I just want to share with you the Chamber is having a membership drive for the month of October. The kickoff breakfast will be at the Moose Lodge on October 11th. So be sure to check out the Facebook page and the pismochamber.com website to learn more about how you can become involved. Let's go over a few things so you know how to participate tonight. We do have a large audience, and out of respect for time and each other, please do your best to limit your distractions and mute your phone. The session is being live streamed through Facebook and recorded. If you happen to miss a portion or need to leave early, you'll be able to view a recording. We're going to invite the candidates shortly to introduce themselves and then to answer some questions. During the open forum, which will take place in the second half of the program, we will take questions or comments via the chat box or the question box from the audience. And whether you're on Zoom or Facebook, you can type them in, and they'll get headed over to me, and then I will send them to the candidates. We're going to do our best to get to as many as we can this evening. Just remember, the views and opinions expressed are those of the candidates and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Pismo Beach Chamber of Commerce or Empower Consulting Group. Any content provided by the candidates are of their opinion and not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, or anyone or anything. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here this evening. We appreciate your time and your effort to participate in this forum. I'd like to ask each of you to do a brief introduction. So Dan, let's go ahead and start with you.
All right, very good. Well, good evening, and thanks to the Chamber for sponsoring this forum, and thanks to everybody in the community for tuning in. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about our campaign and to answer your questions. So thank you again. I entered this race after several members of the community asked me to run. Some are small business owners who have struggled to get help from the current mayor, help that they needed to keep their doors open during the pandemic that we've all been dealing with. Others are neighbors who have reached out to the mayor on any number of items, but felt they didn't get the help that they needed. So they asked me to run. Now, I can't tell you how many people have told me that they have asked for help on various occasions and were told that, well, if we help you with that, then we have to do that for everyone. Well, that is exactly the point of government. And I feel as though government needs to be more responsive. We're in a time of crisis. It is a medical and economic crisis. And it's a time when we need to hear from our leaders, when we ought to expect them to step forward and be proactive. So my platform is built around three concepts. First is vision. And by that, I mean a vision for the future and how we can keep Pismo's unique culture front and center as we move forward and prepare for the years ahead. The second is communication. I want to hear from our residents, from you, and I want to make sure that your voices are heard and included in the decision-making process. The third is responsiveness, and that means when our residents are hurting, I want to make sure that we figure out our solutions and act quickly and not wait weeks or months to enact help. So my feeling about this is that today we have many of the same problems that we've been dealing with for years: traffic snarls, parking shortages, trash on our streets and beaches, and I want to fix all that. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I was happy to see that last night, many of the city council candidates had adopted some of my platform, which included acquiring outline parking, providing regular trolley service, and extending the bike path to connect the Bob Jones Trail and the Oceano Dunes. Again, thanks for the opportunity to hear from you.
Thanks, Dan. Ed?
Again, I want to thank the Chamber for hosting this forum tonight. I just first want to respond to Mr. Shadwell. He called me on an issue about having problems with people going down the street, which is a dead-end street. and we solved that problem. So I'm kind of surprised at his comments. I've been the mayor for 4 years. I've lived in this beautiful city for 26 years. I listened to the residents when I was running for office. The residents said we need to fix up the city, especially the downtown. And now we have the beautiful brand new pier, or the beautiful pier plaza, and the downtown is family friendly. With respect to Shell Beach, I listened to the residents, especially Shell Beach Improvement Group. And they said they want a brand new streetscape with underground utilities, a bike and pedestrian path, and make it attractive. And we've done that. I've supported the critical funding for Pismo Preserve to make it a beautiful place for recreation by our families. I supported fixing up the parks. Dinosaur Caves has a new playground equipment and additional parking. And it's a place where the children can play, and with restrictions, of course, but can play and get some exercise. I've supported various bluff erosion projects, which include access to the beach. We've completed several paving projects in the city, but there's much more to do. We need to build a new fire station. That's one of my primary objectives. Is we have a fire station that definitely needs to be replaced. I'm leading the effort on that. A new fire station will lead to much quicker response times and could have the potential for saving lives. I've been trying very hard in my time in office to listen to the community. I've done so, and we've made a lot of progress. There's a lot more to do, and that's why I'm running for re-election.
Ed. So our first question is, what do you feel is most important for our city right now to assure our success in the future? What do you feel is most important for our city right now to assure our success in the future? Ed, let's hear from you.
Well, I think COVID is one of the key things. COVID has such a huge impact on our city, especially for our businesses. And we did open up for the first city to allow restaurants, for example, to use their parking lots when we first went to limited indoor dining. We subsequently allowed restaurants to work outside. We need to make sure our businesses can survive. So when we're through this, that we will be able to continue on and make progress in the future. We also have basically one of the key objectives I've always had is in this community is to have a good quality of life and protect our residents. As far as COVID goes, as mayor, I've been meeting regularly with a county health officer to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our residents safe. And we've done fairly well. We have the lowest COVID per capita infection rate in South County. Once we're through with this COVID, hopefully it won't be too much longer. We need to go back and start working on many of these other projects we've started so we can weather the next drought, so we can be safe from fire, wildland fire, and continue making the progress we've already started.
Thank you, Ed. Dan, let's hear from you.
Yeah, well, I would agree with the mayor in that COVID-19, I think, is the biggest challenge, certainly immediately, in terms of not only our health, but our economy moving forward. I would point out that while the city has an ordinance in place, it is basically one that requires shopkeepers and waiters and waitresses to bear the brunt of enforcement. So while employees are required to wear masks and there are signs posted in the windows, it basically comes down to waiters and waitresses to police that. And that puts them in a position of having to choose between good tips and public health. So I would like to see a general ordinance across the board. It doesn't have to always be enforced with a stick, but I think it's important to be able to at least refer to that. So that conversation then that an employee can have is, if you don't put on your mask, I have to go tell the boss, which is what it is right now, to listen, we don't want you to get hit with a ticket. We want you to have a great time. We want you to stay safe, and we want all of our residents to stay safe as well. That messaging difference makes all the difference in the world to people who are hoping to be able to continue to pay their bills and live in a safe, healthy environment. Regarding other infrastructure, I think we definitely need to get a handle on the parking and the traffic snarls that we've been looking at for years and years and years. And frankly, the mayor has been in office for years now and was on the planning commission before that. It's kind of astonishing to me that we're still looking at a lot of these same problems. And what I hear from people across the board is that they generally agree on these problems, and they also agree on many of the solutions. So let's get it done.
Excellent. Thank you so very much. So our next question, if you win the election, what will you do in the first 90 days? So Dan, let's start with you.
Okay, sure. Well, the first one is I will push to re-examine a general ordinance across the board that takes the onus off of employees to enforce public health. And we can get that general ordinance that can then be, I mean, if we need to write tickets, if we have bad actors that are acting out or being obnoxious and we need to call the police or summon an officer, we can do that in those extreme cases. But I think across the board, it allows people to improve that communication. In addition to that, I would also like to begin work on a trolley system that would pick up and drop off people at various locations around Shell Beach and Pismo Beach and provide better access to the Pismo Preserve, which is already overrun by a lack of parking there. But it would get people out of their cars and begin to alleviate some of the pressure on the parking, not only in Shell Beach, but in the downtown areas too, and begin to alleviate some of those traffic snarls. I spoke with city staff who'd indicated that we could have that up and running as soon as next summer if we just made it a priority. So that'll be my big priority as well.
Great, thank you so much. So Mayor Ed, I have to apologize. I just want to make sure that I've given you the opportunity to answer both of the questions. I got a little caught up with the dryness in my throat, so I want to make sure you have a chance to answer the first question, which was, what do you feel is most important for our city right now to assure our success in the future? And then the second question, which was, what would you do in the first 90 days if elected?
Yes, I did answer the first question though already.
Okay. I thought so. I just
I
wanted to
did
make
so,
sure.
yes, I did. First of all, with respect to the trolley, that's something we're already planning to do. It's not anything new. We already have a trolley that runs around the area, and we had planned it to reprogram it to actually pick up, to take people to the Pismo Preserve. So it's nothing new. We were already planning to do something like that. As far as what we need to do when I am reelected, I plan to get reelected here. If the citizens will honor me with continuing to serve, is to continue, as I mentioned, on the new fire station. That existing fire station is basically, it's the old volunteer fire station. It's basically a garage. Once we get going on that, that means we can start make progress on improving our service to the community with have much better fire response. With respect to the garage downtown, that's the other thing we're working on. We have a new parking structure that we're moving forward on to help relieve congestion. I'm also serving on an executive committee and the board of the San Luis Obispo Council of Governments. And we have a major project. The top priority of SLOCOG is a third lane on Highway 101. I've met with top state officials to advocate for that third lane to help relieve the congestion in our city. If I'm reelected, I will continue to do so. I've got experience in getting things done, and I will make sure that happens. There's several other things too. I mentioned the Central Coast Blue. We're making a lot of progress on that, which will be an additional source of water to help protect our groundwater basin during the next drought. We will have another drought. I've been leading the effort on that. I've advocated with state and federal officials to get grant funding. We've got $2.8 million in grants already, and I will continue working on that. So I've got a record of accomplishment. I'd like to keep moving forward to help improve our city.
Thank you. So Mayor, we're going to ask you this question first. What strengths do you believe you bring to this position?
I think one of the key things is my experience. I mentioned already some of what I've done. I've got a doctorate in chemistry. I've been an emergency preparedness professional for 25 years. I serve on various boards and commissions. I mentioned the SLOCOG, which provides funding for transit and transportation. I serve on the Regional Transit Authority. I also am a board member and an officer of the County Fire Safe Council to help make our community more fire safe. We complete a lot of projects here in Pismo Beach. I also serve on, I previously served on nonprofits. I've raised tens of thousands of dollars to help serve working families with various programs. I've got experience in leadership on many of the projects I've described. I've worked with the other cities to help get Central Coast Blue moving forward. That's basically a large amount of, I've have a lot of experience on these various programs, and I've been successful in getting them accomplished.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mayor. Dan? What strength do you believe you
I'm
bring
sorry.
to this position? Just want to make sure you heard the question.
Oh, yeah, very good. Thank you so much. So a variety of things, actually. I have pretty broad experience in real estate, but for the better part of the last couple decades, I've been in the communications business. And there's nothing like a crisis to point out the need for good communications from leaders. And I will just tell you very frankly that as I have gone door to door, maintaining my distancing and wearing masks, but dropping literature and talking to some neighbors, it's astonishing how many people have no idea who the mayor is. And when I ask them about what's been done to help them, many just feel frustrated and feel as though when they reach out to the mayor's office, they don't get much help. They're told, listen, if I do that for you, then I have to do it for somebody else. And I don't think that's an answer that cuts it. I come from a communications background that allows for interaction. When I start out the day as a journalist, you know very little about the story that you're going to be telling that night. So you seek out the very best experts you can. You take that information and you distill it so that you can explain even very complicated stories to a sixth grader in about 1 minute and 30 seconds. And I can use those communication skills to make sure everybody's voice is included in government.
Thank you. So now tell me, what are your weaknesses, Dan?
Well, let's see. In terms of weaknesses, I guess the mayor probably would point to maybe a lack of experience. He has a lot of experience, but frankly, I think that also points to a problem in that with all that experience, it's strange to me that so many of these problems still remain unsolved. The traffic, the parking, the trash. These are things that I find that I, through communication processes with just speaking to people, I find we have broad agreement on many of these solutions. So, I would say that actually it kind of feeds back into a loop of, strength through communication, which is what I think we need.
Okay, thank you so much. And Mayor, what would you say your weaknesses are?
Well, I certainly am a very busy person, and I probably could do better on some communications. But I also, just to respond to some of the comments by my opponent, we're making progress in a lot of these things. As far as traffic goes, I've been advocating for taking over Highway 1. If you look at our transportation or circulation study, which we completed a few years ago, had a lot of public input into it. And I don't recall Mr. Shadwell any of our public input on that item, but we are moving forward on it. I've been met with legislators in Sacramento, and we have the legislation already approved to move forward on it. And if we take over Highway 1, it gives us more opportunities to improve circulation downtown. The Highway 101 I mentioned already, we do have traffic. I've been leading the effort to try to get that third lane to help reduce the impact on our city. So perhaps I could communicate better, but on the other hand, we're getting things done. And as far as the trash goes, we were overwhelmed with trash during the takeout, when people were taking out food and leaving it everywhere. And the next council meeting, we're planning to increase staffing so we can take care of trash better. We want to have a safe city. We want to have a clean city, and we certainly are working toward that.
Thank you both very much. And again, just for the audience and for the candidates here, I just want to remind us, this isn't really a debate. We want to just ask the questions and hear the response related to you and your experience and what you can do for the great city. So the next question is really a fun one. If you received $1 million to use for the city any way you wanted, what would you do with it and why? So Mayor, let's start with you.
$1 million would be nice. The city's doing very well financially already, though. That's one thing. Fiscally, we're in great shape. That hasn't been mentioned yet. We have the strongest fiscal shape of any city in the county. With that $1 million, I think I would. I'd probably use it to jumpstart the fire station work. As I mentioned, that's the critical need we have right now. We're a first-rate city with a third-rate fire station. And we could use some additional funding to get started on that design of that fire station. As I say, I think that's key to helping protect our residents. And certainly during the June 15th fire in Pismo Beach, the quick response of our firefighters made a huge difference.
Great, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, well, I think I'd take that $1 million and I'd make that trolley service that's in the planning stages a reality, and make sure that we have pickup and drop off points every 15 minutes during the busy season of the summer and our 3-day weekends. What I hear from people over and over again is that on the weekends, they just want to avoid the downtown area at all costs because it's such a snarl down there. So I would get that started. I would also like to see the city begin to look at outlying parking areas that would be less expensive and probably easier to coordinate for these pickup and drop off points. So I would have regular service from hotels to restaurants in the downtown area, make sure that we have extra stops and pickups at Pismo Preserve. And I would work to continue to make sure that we begin to get people out of their cars and lessen some of that traffic pressure. And then whatever's left over, I'd add some more trash cans and more trash pickups to make sure that we keep the downtown and beach areas clean.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So what are the most important challenges facing our city and how do you propose to address them? So Dan, why don't we hear from you first?
Okay, sure. Well, I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I think right now we have a lot of unknowns with this COVID situation. As we head into the cold and flu season, there are serious possible complications that could come with additional illnesses that could complicate the COVID numbers. And I think we have to really be very careful when it comes to an international pandemic. We don't have all of the answers yet. So I think we need to be very conservative in our actions about that. I think that it's important that we enforce publicly social distancing, reminding people to wear their masks and be careful, because if we can't keep ourselves safe, we can't keep the economy going. And it's important that we make sure that everybody, particularly the residents here, are not overwhelmed when we have tourism coming from outside.
Okay, thank you. Mayor?
Yeah, I think we definitely do need to continue our efforts to keep everyone safe. Look at the daily records from the county health officer on how we're doing on COVID, and thus far we've been doing pretty well, but we've got to keep up our efforts. We put COVID first struck, we put signs everywhere. We encouraged people to social distance, to wear masks. And I think thus far we've been pretty successful. As hopefully we get perhaps a vaccine this fall or this early next year, we can start getting out of it. But in the meantime, we have to keep it up. It's going to be tough for many of our businesses that are currently outdoors when it starts to rain. And I think that's certainly a consideration that we need to see how we can keep our businesses thriving through the wintertime until we can get indoor dining again. I think beyond that, we've had a huge amount of folks coming to the city. I think it was related to COVID. People were cooped up in their homes. They wanted to get out and they came to Pismo Beach. It was a safe place, safe, attractive place to come. I even cut a video saying, please don't come now, we're not ready for you, but they came anyway. And I think we've been overwhelmed, and I would hope that as this COVID dies down, that we will be able to get back to smaller numbers of people coming here so it's more manageable.
Thank you very much. So balancing business needs with the needs of our residents can be challenging. How will you help develop win-win situations? So Dan, let's hear from you first.
Well, we are dependent on tourism in Pismo Beach for an enormous part of our, nearly half of all of the tax revenues that come in from TOT tax, from transient occupancy tax. So we need to be very careful to maintain that, and we need to continue setting aside money. And the fact that we have reserves is, I think, in large part due to the fact that the restaurants and hotel businesses have been very good in managing all of the COVID precautions. We also got to be careful, though, that we don't assume that just because in the past we've been safe so far, we will be moving forward. The chicken assumes the farmer is his friend until the farmer comes out with a hatchet one day. So we got to be careful to assume that what we've seen so far we don't want to assume that it's going to stay necessarily that good. We hope it will, of course. But I think we need to make sure that we're staying safe first and foremost. I think we need to begin to really push hard on getting more people out of their cars. I would like to see a continuous bike path so that we are linked between San Luis Obispo, the Bob Jones Trail, Shell Beach, and carry that bicycle path down into Pismo Beach and link it up to Grover Beach and Oceano, so that we can begin to transform some of the type of tourism that we bring from other areas to a more sustainable and perhaps environmental experience. And I think through that process, we can encourage tourism where people show up with their bikes on the back of their car, they park the car, take the bikes off the rack and spend their entire vacation on bicycling. And I think that would be a huge boon, not only to Pismo Beach, but surrounding communities. And the leaders I've spoken to in San Luis Obispo, as well as AG and Grover Beach, have all been on board, and they're just pretty much waiting for Pismo to make that a priority.
Great, thank you. Mayor?
Well, I think it's always a balancing act. Tourists are the revenue source for our city. It's why we can get things done. It's always been that balancing act. I always start out though with we need to make sure our residents are safe. My overarching goal is always to look at how we can make Pismo Beach livable, healthy, and safe. Always look at those three items whenever I make a decision. I think especially if you're looking at the bicycling program, we already have a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, which envisions the kinds of things that we already envisions extending the bike and pedestrian path from Shell Beach all the way up to the Bob Jones Trail. I serve on the SLO Council of Governments, and one of our top priorities besides besides Highway 101 is the Bob Jones Trail continuation across 101. Another is the Avila Beach roundabout, which will help bicyclists get through that intersection. I support that. It has the ancillary benefit of providing parking for people that that go up to the Ontario Ridge Trail. We have a lot of problems in the El Portal area with people crowding that area. The goal is to really shift a lot of that traffic away from Pismo and move it over to the Avila Beach Park and Ride area. So there's a lot of things going on here. We've, as I say, the bike and pedestrian path we approved 10 years ago, and we've been implementing that already. As I say, the Shell Beach streetscape was one component of it. It does envision going all the way from the north of the part of the city all the way to connect to bike trails in Arroyo Grande and Grover Beach. We've got many other efforts underway. Certainly the Pismo Preserve is another factor where we built a path underneath the freeway so people could get there by walking or riding their bicycles a lot easier, and get people out to recreate without having to get in their cars. So we've made progress, and we could certainly have a lot more things to do.
Great. Thank you so much. So next question. Are there any propositions currently on the California ballot that you feel will negatively impact business in Pismo Beach? So are there any propositions currently on the California ballot that you feel will negatively impact business in Pismo Beach? So Mayor, let's start with you.
Well, I think the big one is Proposition 15, which would roll back the Proposition 13 provisions for business properties. If those business properties have to pay more in taxes, that means our local business will pay more in rent. And it would be a huge hit to our local businesses. They in turn would have to raise the amount that they charge for their services, or they go out of business. So I think that one is certainly a job killer, and I do oppose it. I think the tax situation already in the state is pretty heavy, and I don't think that this is going to do much as far as fixing the revenue situation, but it certainly will hurt our local businesses. I do oppose Proposition 15.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. Dan?
Well, I agree that Proposition 15 is a potential problem here. And that's in part because a tax on business and commercial properties, it's very difficult. It's difficult to implement on a local level too. And there are questions even about how you would figure out what that tax would look like, whether you, for example, base that on square footage and location of a property, the overall value, or whether you base it on rents and what it brings in the market. On top of that, this is the wrong time to be implementing a business tax. We need to be providing more proactive support for businesses. And again, those are some of the people that approached me feeling as though they would like better consideration, more proactive leadership from government. So I absolutely agree with them that we need to be supporting our businesses and problem solving now. And this is not that time for that kind of a tax, for sure.
Great. Thank you, both of you. So how would you help to support small businesses in our area who have been impacted by COVID? Mayor, let's hear from you.
Well, it's early on when COVID first struck, we were I think the only city that began the bi-weekly, twice weekly Zoom meetings with our local businesses to explain how the CARES Act and the other funding programs, SBA and so forth, were available to help our small businesses. We have lobbyists in Sacramento and in Washington, DC, and we were getting information from them. We passed it on to the businesses. We provided that forum. We've also, as I already mentioned, of course, we've allowed businesses, the restaurants, to expand out into the parking areas, to use their own parking lots or in our street. And I think one of the key things is to keep that line of communication open with our businesses, so we hear what the problems are and we can resolve them. From what I can tell, is the businesses are doing pretty well, and that there are some that are struggling still, but the ones that have been able to expand, for the restaurants, for example, into the downtown and Shell Beach, are doing pretty well at this point. But there's still some struggling businesses, for example, that can't even open yet, so are limited opening, and those businesses are still hurting, and I'm not sure what we can do until we get the okay to open.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan?
Well, with all due respect to the mayor, many of the businesses that approached me about running to begin with were the ones that felt as though they were having to pull teeth in order to get, they said it was like pulling teeth trying to get the city on board, and particularly the mayor on board with some of the adaptations that they needed. And frankly, some of those restaurateurs were saying that AG and SLO had both come to them proactively, working to try to find solutions and help them survive. So I think we need to make sure that we're having conversations with our residents and our businesses to make sure that they're getting the support they need in a timely fashion. I would also say that this is an opportunity to learn a little bit about how we could transform our downtown and Shell Beach areas with that expanded dining capacity. I know many of those restaurateurs are concerned that if the COVID situation ends sometime soon, they're going to be expected to roll back all of that outdoor dining. And I think this is an opportunity to look at how we can reimagine our outdoor dining and downtown areas to make them more pedestrian friendly and business friendly.
Great, thank you. So in relationship to that last question, which was, how would you help to support small businesses in our area who have been impacted by COVID? What are your long-term recovery plans? So Dan, let's start with you.
Well, in terms of long-term recovery plans, I guess it depends on which businesses we're talking about. For example, if we're talking about restaurants, I think, again, beginning to kind of reimagine how we see the way businesses interact with pedestrians and beginning to try to provide more support for a more pedestrian bicycle friendly downtown can do a lot toward helping boost those businesses. I mean, the truth of the matter is these restaurants that are surviving are doing, the ones that are doing well because they've effectively been able to double the amount of space indoors. If we're talking about shopkeepers and people who are otherwise having to stay closed, I think we need to figure out ways to provide licensing for those folks to have more of their vending in outdoor areas. I'd like to see more restaurants and buildings go in that have opportunities for rooftop decks and outdoor dining experiences, which, you know, we frankly are a little short on.
Thank you, Dan. Mayor?
Well, I think we need to see how this whole COVID thing unfolds. Certainly, there'll be a transition period once we get through. Once the green light is to reopen everything, we'll have a transition period to see where we go from here. And I think we'll take our time to see that when we transition, that we do take care of our businesses. But we do have a problem with parking downtown. It appears to me that we do have more parking congestion downtown with the outdoor dining. I do support the outdoor dining, but it does lead to more parking congestion and traffic congestion since more people are looking for parking and there's more cars on the street. So I think we certainly need a transition period. I'm certainly open to looking at how we might extend some of these things, but at this point, it's more of a see where we're going to see where the state is with respect to reopening, see what we can do so safely, and then work with the business community and how we can transition to make sure we can get through that transition period.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for taking the time to answer those questions. We're just going to take a minute, get some water, stand up, stretch, and then we're going to take the questions from the audience. We have quite a few questions to get through during the time frame that we have allotted, and to also give you the opportunity to have your 2 minutes of just closing. So just bear with me for a minute here while I switch gears. All right. All right. So, Mayor, I'd like to ask you this question first. What are the biggest challenges you think the city faces in the next term? And since you're the incumbent, you know, you might have some insight that perhaps those of us on the outside looking in don't have.
Well, I've covered some of those already. During the last drought, for example, we came close to losing 2 of our 3 water supplies. We came close to having saltwater intrusion in our groundwater basin, which would have severely curtailed our use of water, which would have been devastating to our residents and businesses. Central Coast Blue is a drought-resistant answer to that problem. When the drought struck, I determined to find some way to make sure we could survive the next drought. And the result is Central Coast Blue. As I mentioned already, I've been leading the effort to get funding for Central Coast Blue. We've got $2.8 million already for planning. The next phase is the construction side. I've made progress in meeting with the legislators in Sacramento and Washington, D.C., and with the various grant funding agencies. And hopefully we'll get well over $10 million in grants to complete Central Coast Blue. We've got good partnership, working relationship with the other cities of Grover Beach and Rio Grande. The other thing is we've got, I mentioned already, the fire station. We're planning to move forward on that. The other one is the parking structure. We've already have a plan to move forward on making more parking available downtown. That would solve a major problem we've got. Once we finish Shell Beach Streetscape, we need to go back to repaving streets. We put some of the street repaving on hold because we were busy on Shell Beach Streetscape.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Dan,
Mhm.
how have you been active in our community prior to running?
Well, let's see. I've been covering as a journalist the community for many, many years. So I have been helping to facilitate getting good information to everybody in the community on a daily basis as a journalist. But in addition to that, the mayor mentioned early on that I had come to the city about trying to address the cul-de-sac confusion where people come down Boker Avenue and then realize that it's a dead end at the very end, and then because they're frustrated, race back up the street. So my wife and I came to the city. We went through the traffic committee. We basically were promised that we were going to have a shift in the signage. It took a lot longer than we were told it was going to. We have somewhat of a solution now, but it's still not really fixed. So despite what the mayor would say. Anyway, long story short, I'm continuing to push on that. I've been active in terms of attending city council meetings to weigh in on various building projects, including the Dell's Pizza. So as a community member, I have been participating pretty actively, I would say, but as a journalist, I had to kind of hew the center line on all of that.
Okay, thank you. So next question. Why has the construction on Shell Beach been managed in the manner that it has? And is there any room for improvement there? So Mayor, let's start with you and then we'll ask Dan the same question, how it might be more effective.
Well, first of all, the project is really 6 projects. It's not just the streetscape. It's underground utilities, both water, sewer, well, the water, new water lines, underground, the power lines, build the new multi-use path and so on. We had some design issues and we worked through those. The other problem is we were hit with a 100-year flood in February. We were hit with COVID in March. We were hit with fire in June, and all of those 3 did slow us down. When the contractor was working, they discovered buried pipes that weren't supposed to be there. That took longer. It was a very complex project. Cost over $13 million. It's the biggest project the city has ever undertaken. It took a lot longer than I was hoping. I thought we'd be done by June, and it's October, and we're almost October, and most of the work is done at this point. I think the key thing is it's a very challenging project. A lot of things we didn't know were there when we started, and we had some serious design problems from the folks that designed it that really hurt us.
Thank you, Mayor. Dan?
Well, gosh, let's see. So the Shell Beach, well, so it's taking longer than expected, which is not unusual for construction projects. But I would say I hear from so many people in Shell Beach, what is going on with the lighting? It was all set up on one side of the street. It was so darn bright that people couldn't even sleep at night. We've added dimmer after dimmer after dimmer, trying to I would just say basically that was a design flaw that should have been caught early on. I don't know why we don't have these the street lights alternating back and forth across the street, which would have better lit this bicycle path / pedestrian path. I also hear from people who just feel like it's so narrow, they're afraid somebody's going to get killed on the street. And then I hear from other people who say the bump outs create such a big problem when they're trying to turn out onto the street that they're frequently heading into oncoming traffic. So, you know, I mean, a lot of these things, they always say if you're going to build a house correctly, you have to get the design correct to begin with before you ever start breaking ground. And I think a lot of these things were foreseeable. By and large, I think it's an attractive project, but you know, I think this is emblematic of putting Band-Aids on things rather than doing good long-term planning with a holistic approach.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share a comment, and then there's a question related to the comment. So living in downtown Pismo Beach, I frequently feel that the needs of the tourists take priority over the residents. So how will you mitigate the impacts of traffic, tourism, etc., with the feeling, right, of the residents, the people who actually live in the community? So Dan, we're going to start with you, and then we'll go to the mayor.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And I think it's also something that we can address through re-envisioning the way we think about transportation in the downtown and Shell Beach areas. And we've already discussed by acquiring outlying parking areas. If we have metered parking in the downtown areas, in Shell Beach and the downtown Pismo Beach areas, and we also have permit parking in some of the ancillary streets where we have had historic problems with people not being able to get out of their driveways, for example. But we include good signage to other outlying parking in various areas, which could include the section over by Avila Bay Drive and Shell Beach Road. And then regular shuttle service, we can move people out of their cars and onto shuttles, and mass transit, of course, will provide serious relief to our traffic snarls in the downtown area. It will help make downtown feel more pedestrian friendly and less like the folks who are in that area are being just subjected to an onslaught every time tourist season comes around. So those are parts of the answer, I think.
Mayor?
Yes, well, I think the parking structure is one of the things we need to get done to help relieve the parking issue. Parking is in high demand downtown in the summertime, especially, and that will help alleviate some of the problem. I think the other thing I mentioned already is I've been leading the effort to take over Highway 1 through the city. That would give the city more control. Right now, Caltrans controls it. It would give the city more control over circulation, so we can have better ways to move people through the city. And I think circulation is part of the solution too. I'm sympathetic to the folks who live downtown. The summertime, it's often gridlock. We need to work to help manage that better. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in favor of bicycle, pedestrian type transportation. I support the extension of the promenade farther north so that people from the motel district can walk along the promenade downtown rather than drive downtown. I think there's a lot, those kinds of things we can do to try to get people out of their cars to get downtown with and make it a little bit less impactful on the downtown especially.
Thank you. So Pismo Beach is going to face some very tough financial issues next year. What is your plan to address these issues? So Dan, let's start with you.
Well, I'm guessing that we're probably talking about COVID again, and certainly if we have a tough period here with a pandemic where people are not able to pay their rents and various bills, that could impact the overall economy as a whole. So I think one of the things that we need to be really, first of all, prevention is key. And I think we need to, again, enact a general ordinance requiring that people outside wear their masks and social distance. So I think we can do a lot right now to mitigate that rather than putting the onus on employees in some of our most vulnerable businesses to police that. It had support of 3 members on the council, but did not get passed. And I think that needs to be revisited. Secondly, I think that from the city standpoint, in terms of what utilities it controls, including water and sewer, I think for folks who are having trouble paying their bills, I think the city can work in some leniency in terms of payment plans and foregoing late fees. And then I think we also just need to make sure that we're communicating so that when businesses are struggling, we know it as a government and can reach out and come up with plans on an individual basis, not waiting until there's a problem already upon us, but actually proactively reaching out to businesses to help solve those.
Thank you. Mayor?
Well, the premise of the question was that we're struggling financially. Is that the
Next
question?
year.
Pardon?
Next year.
Next
So-
year.
Yeah, next year.
I'm not sure why that, I'm not sure I agree with the premise of the question because thus far we're doing very well financially. The city, at the end of the fiscal year, which was June 30th, we had $4 million in our checking account. We expected to have much less than that, but through cost cutting, we were able to get our checking account up to $4 million. We have a $5.5 million general revenue reserve that we have not touched, in addition to other set-asides and reserves for a total of about $13 million in cash and reserves we have not touched. So if we do have a downturn, we are prepared for it already. If we need to cut back some more, we can. But at this point, fiscally, we're in great financial shape. The other cities are hurting much more. Our bed tax, our TOT, is in the last couple of months is up over last year already. So we're ahead of last year on our revenue for the last couple of months. So fiscally, we're doing very well. And I don't see a financial problem. Even if we had something, a downturn next year, I think we could weather it without any problem. And then when the COVID thing goes away, we could go back to the way we have been.
Thank you. How do you propose to address the increasing homelessness and rising crime in the city that is sure to come with the recession? So Dan, let's hear from you.
Well, I'm not sure again that this is a scenario necessarily that I would agree with, that we have a coming recession that is going to be dealing, that is going to be increasing homelessness. Now, here's the thing. Homelessness is a statewide problem. It's a countywide problem. And I think it requires a holistic approach. And that means wraparound services, including drug counseling. It includes help for folks who are suffering from mental illness. And there's a significant proportion of the homeless population that is either drug addicted or having mental illness issues. So we need to provide better support for those people. I think we also need to be working with the county and with adjoining communities to make sure that we have adequate housing for homeless people. There is the project on 4th Street is basically a good start, I think, in terms of providing some relief, but we need to be looking at this as a team, not just as Pismo Beach. And I think it's something that requires close monitoring to just make sure that we don't have a problem emerging that we're not very aware of.
Thank you. Mayor?
Yes, homelessness is a major challenge for all of the cities in California, and Pismo Beach is no exception. There's a lot of issues with homelessness. Some people choose to be homeless. Some are homeless by circumstance. There's the drug addiction. There's the mental illness. And I think one of the key things is to support 5 Cities Homeless Coalition and the building of a service center. We looked at having such a service center in Pismo Beach, but the land was so expensive, didn't make sense to do it. We do have the project in cooperation with People's Self-Help Housing on 4th Street to put in approximately 50 units of low to moderate income housing. That's going to help some. The other part of it is to work with the other cities. And as mayor, I meet every month, except during the COVID crisis, but every month with the fellow mayors, and we've been working together as mayors for some time on trying to address this, not only with the cities, but with the county. And I know the county administrative officer and city managers are also working on a parallel path. So we are working together. It requires a regional solution, and we're headed in that direction.
Great, thank you. Do you believe that communities that desire to protect themselves and become gated should be allowed to do so by the city. Mayor, let's hear from you first.
We have some existing gated communities, and I think some of those are certainly, they're existing, they're historic, and those should continue as they are. As far as any future gated communities, we don't really have much land left for any more gated communities. And I generally don't support gated communities, but I'm happy to support the ones that are already there.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, Pismo Beach for the most part is already pretty well built out. So if there were going to be new gated communities, I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but again, I don't see any problems with gated communities maintaining their gates, but I don't see really any places where that would necessarily be a good idea to add them. So, yeah.
Okay, so what is your position on the continued closure of the Oceano Dunes SBRA to vehicle and OHV traffic and the economic impact? So Dan, let's hear from you first.
Well, of course, the dunes are not, that's not city managed. It's state park. So what I think is, though, that there is an opportunity for us to begin to really shift what we do in terms of inviting tourism that would be able to explore the dunes. And I talked a little bit earlier about the idea of extending this bicycle path. And I mean a state-of-the-art bicycle path. I'm not talking about a couple of strips on the edge of the asphalt on whatever road you happen to be talking about. I'm talking about an actual state-of-the-art bicycle path that is lit, that is substantial, that is maintained, and that would allow for viable bicycle traffic to and from not only the Pismo Beach area to Shell Beach to the Bob Jones Trail, but south through Grover Beach to the Oceano Dunes. And I think we could begin to attract a type of tourism, again, that's interested in getting out and experiencing the beautiful outdoors and that environment in a way that would supplement what we already have there.
Thank you. Mayor?
Well, certainly the dunes are quite a treasure. I used to hike in the northern part of the dunes with my family because the northern part of the dunes has no vehicles. It's a beautiful area to hike, to slide down the dunes, and but you had to leave by the early afternoon because the wind picked up. It got kind of miserable out there. As far as the opening of the dunes, it's kind of a complicated project because there's so many issues at this time that are impacting the closure, and a lot of people do enjoy it, and if they can open it safely, and there is, I serve on the Air Pollution Control District, and we're currently trying to get better better treatments of the area to of the dunes to reduce the dust emissions down there. As far as the impact on Pismo Beach, we already have Pismo Preserve now as an area where people can go out and recreate. And we've certainly seen during the COVID crisis, while the dunes are closed, it has not hurt our tourism. So we're not relying upon the dunes for our tourism, but a lot of people do come here for that purpose. And if there's a way to keep it open safely, I would support it.
Great, thank you. Where do you stand on the tides proposal and projects like that going forward? So Mayor, let's hear from you first on this one.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the full, all the question.
Where do you stand on the tides proposal and projects like that going forward?
I'm sorry, the which proposal?
The tides? The tides, Tides.
Okay, could you help me on that tides proposal? I'm not sure which one they're talking about.
I wish I could, but that's exactly what they typed into the question. So it says, where do you stand on the tides proposal and projects like that going forward?
Maybe that's a wind energy proposal or a wave energy proposal. I'm not sure if that's what it is. There is a Cal Poly is working on a wave energy proposal to use waves to generate electricity off the coast of Morro Bay, and That's still, I think, in the early stages. There's efforts to build offshore wind off Morro Bay and tie into the existing PG&E power transmission lines in Morro Bay. I think if that works, that could certainly be a benefit. I supported already here in Pismo Beach. I was leading the effort. I led the effort to put in solar and energy efficiency in the city. We've got 700 kilowatts of solar, and all of our buildings are now energy efficient.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Dan?
Excuse me. Well, with respect to sustainable energy, I'm a big fan, and I think that we can continue to do more and urge developers and homeowners as they move forward to add solar power. And I do think it's important for us to be re-envisioning how the city gets its power, particularly as we look toward Diablo decommissioning. So I think we want to have a sustainable energy source. I think we all want to be contributing as best we can, whether it's with photovoltaics or water, solar planning, or even geothermal. I think, frankly, is something that we could look at as well. And it also points up the need, I think, to perhaps reimagine even how we capture water. I would be a big advocate for putting in cisterns in new homes and redevelopment of existing homes so that they're able to capture the rainwater landing on their roof to supplement some of the water supplies that we have, so that at least that water can be used for landscaping, if not actual domestic use.
Okay, thank you. So do you support underground utilities for the downtown core? So Dan, let's start with you.
Yeah, I support undergrounding of all kinds of the utilities. I think honestly, I grew up in Colorado, and we used to have just horrendous blizzards. It would just, I mean, you'd see temperatures drop to 40 below zero, and we rarely lost power. Here in Pismo Beach, I can't even count how many times we have lost power when there's just been a light rain. I think undergrounding our utilities should be a big priority, not just because it provides a more stable energy use and reliability, but I think, frankly, undergrounding those power lines would go a long way to improving the aesthetic around Pismo Beach, whether it's in the Heights or in the streets in Shell Beach, where those power lines in particular still run right down the front of the street.
Mayor?
With respect to the downtown, we are requiring new construction to put underground utilities, and as new construction's gone in, they've done so. Underground utilities is very expensive. If you look at what the cost was in Shell Beach alone on that 18-block stretch, I think it was about $4 million. It's very expensive to put it in, and the only way you can make it happen is if the local residents or the businesses decide to form a district to help pay for it. The city doesn't have nearly enough money to do it, and traditionally it has been done by the businesses or the homeowners in that area. It's a lot more attractive. It's why I supported the underground utilities in Shell Beach as part of the streetscape.
Okay, great. So how best can the city connect James Way and the parts of the city that are east of downtown with the rest of the city? So Mayor, would you like to take that first, please?
The connector of James, well, it's a larger issue of how do we get across the Pismo Creek and the railroad tracks. And this has been a problem for some time in this city. It's still in our general plan to look to find ways to make that happen. But it frankly is very costly and it's a very costly project to accomplish. It's something that I think we definitely need to keep it on the books to move in that direction. But looking at the cost right now, as I say, it's very expensive.
Dan?
Well, I think that needs to be a priority. I think we need to be working with Caltrans proactively to solve some of these problems. I mean, that particular section is just a bit of a mess, and I think as part of reimagining how we begin to develop bicycle paths and our infrastructure that moves us forward so that we have better on and off ramps leading into the downtown area and better connectors with James Way. I think we need to, that's one of the areas where we really need to give some focus.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to remind our audience, if there are any other questions that you'd like us to focus on, please feel free to type them into the chat. We're just about at that moment when we need to wrap up this part and allow our candidates an opportunity to share some closing thoughts. So I do have one more question though, just in case. Let me just look at it really quickly. What is one thing that you would like residents to know about Pismo Beach? And Dan, why don't we start with you?
Well, that's a good question. There are lots of great things that I would like residents to know about Pismo Beach. The first is that I think, despite the fact that so many people have felt so frustrated with some of these nagging problems, we can solve these. And what I've learned from being out in the community just during this campaign is that we have broad agreement, and it's not partisan at all. In fact, people agree left, right, and center that we need to get our traffic situation under control. And it's been like this for years and years and years. And there's no reason, frankly, that we should still be having to live with the traffic problems, the parking shortages, the trash on the beaches, the trash on the streets. There are lots of innovative ways that we can address these. And they can be done in many, many cases very cost effectively through public-private partnerships and grants, and work with the county, work with the state, work with Caltrans to address a lot of these things. So I would say the thing that maybe people don't know about Pismo Beach is that we can solve these problems. We just need to make them the focus of our attention, and we need to make them priorities.
Great, thank you. Mayor?
Well, I think during the heavy tourism season, a lot of our residents stay away from the downtown, but as the tourist season is winding down, I'd recommend those who have not been downtown yet, come down and look at the improvements we made to the downtown. We've got that beautiful pier plaza, the 7-foot tall letters, Pismo Beach. Get back on the pier. A lot of people just like to get out on the pier and walk. So come back downtown and rediscover what we've done down there. I think as far as other things we can do, we are always trying to, as I say, my guiding principle is make the city livable, healthy, and safe. And I've always supported those kinds of things. Walking on the pier, get out on the beach, get out on Pismo Preserve, and look at all the beautiful wonders we've got in this city.
Okay. One more question before we get into the wrap-up portion of the program. What can each of you share regarding Pismo Voice? So Dan, could you start, please?
I'm sorry, regarding Pismo Voice?
Voice. Voice,
Okay.
like as in, vocal?
Yeah. Okay, well, I think I understand the question. What I would say about the voice in Pismo is that we have a broad diversity of people with a broad diversity of interests and a lot of different talents. And I think that the voice of Pismo Beach can best be transitioned into government action through interaction with government leaders. And I think that means weekly videos. I think that means Zoom calls like this moving forward until we're out of the COVID situation. I think it means more town halls. I think it means more active leadership in terms of getting out and walking the streets and talking to people so that that voice resonates in every decision that the city makes.
Mayor?
Pismo Voice is a program we have in the city for people to put their thoughts in on the city webpage for projects. For example, if we have something going on, we encourage people to go onto our webpage and give their feedback on these various projects. It's kind of an open government project we've undertaken to try to get more feedback from the community. So it was an effort. We noticed not too many people coming to council meetings, so we're trying to get more feedback. So we did put in Pismo Voice another means for people to comment on projects and so forth to get better feedback from the community.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Let me just check to see what else we have here, if there's any other last moment questions. So take a sip of water, a nice big breath. We'll get ready here to wrap up very quickly. Yeah, I think we've got lots of good stuff, lots of good questions, lots of great responses. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I am not a resident of Pismo Beach, so I found this very interesting because I am someone who enjoys going and walking on the pier, walking along the sand, walking through the town, you know, just sharing the beauty of the Central Coast. I mean, that's part of the reason my husband and I moved here, is to be able to enjoy all of this beautiful natural beauty, as well as that resort sort of feeling, that feeling like you're on vacation all the time. So thank you so much for that, and learning more about my local community. So at this time, I'm going to give you each a couple minutes to share with us your closing thoughts. And I'd like to go ahead and start with Dan first. And you'll have 2 minutes to share your closing thoughts.
Okay, very good. Well, Liz, thank you again for, and thank you to the Chamber for offering this opportunity to talk about some of these issues and take questions from the audience. I'm running because members of the community asked me to run. I am not a professional politician, but I recognize that a lot of these folks are hurting and they don't feel that the current mayor has been responsive to their needs. And he has a lot of experience and a lot of time in office. And I guess that raises the question as to why many of these problems have not been addressed before now. And I understand the long-term planning aspect, but some of these things, including the trolley, city staff has told me could be done as soon as, or if it was just made a priority. So one of the positive things I've seen as I've walked around talking to people is that, again, by and large, people agree on what the problems are, and by and large, they agree on the solutions. And I think they've been frustrated by a lack of leadership, to be frank, in the public government here in city government. So what you can expect from me, if I'm made mayor, you can count on me to enact a mask ordinance so that waiters and waitresses and retail workers are not forced to have to decide between their tips and public health. You can count on me to start work on regular trolley service that we've been discussing here, and outlying parking to provide service to the Pismo Preserve, the downtown area, Shell Beach, to alleviate parking problems and traffic snarls. And if you live in town and you want to go to Giuseppe's for a nice dinner and have a glass of wine, you'll be able to get home safely and comfortably without driving. You can also count on me to step up our police patrols and add a firefighter. The mayor talks about adding or redoing the firehouse, but we need an additional fire person, a firefighter, to help build out that full company. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Mayor?
Well, thank you very much. I also appreciate the Chamber hosting this forum, and thank you for moderating. I'm running on my record. I listened to the community before we got started on a lot of these projects. We got their feedback, and we've made a lot of progress on them. As I mentioned, the fire station is one of my top priorities, and that will improve response times. I've also been endorsed by the CAL FIRE firefighters. It's the third time they've endorsed me for my leadership in fire safety, which is a huge issue these days. I'm leading the effort in Central Coast Blue. During the last drought, our residents were frustrated that we were about to run out of water, and the Central Coast Blue will be an additional source of water. I'm leading the effort on that. We need to go back to repaving our streets. Once we're done with Shell Beach streetscape, we've put a lot of effort in the Shell Beach area for that streetscape, and now we need to go back to the rest of the community and repave streets elsewhere in the community as well as some side streets in Shell Beach. I've been a strong advocate, as I mentioned, for the Highway 101 third lane to help solve that traffic problem. And I've been guided all along by, as I mentioned, my vision is to make the city livable, healthy, and safe. And that guides through all of my decision making. I do listen. I've before we made any progress in any projects, I went out to the community, listened to what they had to say, and got their feedback and moved forward. So I would ask for the vote of the community to continue serving as mayor of Pismo Beach, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. So on behalf of the Pismo Chamber of Commerce, to our candidates, thank you so much for joining us. And to the audience, thank you for your participation and your patience during this program. It's really been a pleasure to be with all of you this evening. I also want to give a shout out to Jeanette, to Lisa, and to Valerie, who handled all of the behind the scenes things that helped us pull this together. They're a wonderful resource through the chamber for this community. So you guys are amazing, amazing women leaders. So don't forget that you can visit the chamber website at Pismo Beach or pismochamber.com or the Facebook page to learn more about the great things that the Pismo Chamber is doing within the community. Good evening, everyone, and be well. Take care.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great evening.